Hi, today we're going to paint a magical unicorn, and you can get a paint at home kit from sociableart.com, and I have that listed at the bottom of the page, and it will have all the paints and the brushes and a pre-sketched canvas or a printed canvas for you. The first thing that I'm doing here is I have used my blue paint, cobalt blue, and I've mixed it with white paint to create a sky blue. And I'm using the biggest brush I have to fill in this area around the unicorn. Kind of doing some lines around the horn first, and I'll fill in next to the rainbow, and then I'll just fill in that space between. And what I like to do is have one shade of light blue that I created, mixing the blue with some white. And then I like to kind of switch to the darker shade of blue, which is the blue without any white added to it. And I kind of like to put that around the edges, so it's a little darker around the edges. And you can see I'm using my brush here, just dipping in the dark blue paint and adding that in. And it will blend right in with that lighter shade I created if I just do some kind of back and forth little dabbing strokes like this. Back and forth until it blends. And I do want it to stay just a little darker around the edges of the canvas. And so I'm going to continue to fill in with that light blue and continue to add the dark blue around the edges of the canvas. You can also dip in the white occasionally to add a little bit of white into some areas just to make it, not a totally solid color. Now, if you want to do it the easiest way possible, it is perfectly fine to just create one shade of light blue, and just fill in the whole background with one shade of light blue, especially if you're a beginner, and that just makes you feel more comfortable to use just one shade. But I like to just use a little bit of variety of colors just to give it some interest in the background. Here I'm kind of going around that little curl on the horse's mane. And if you find it difficult to get into that little space, you can always switch to a smaller brush. The one rule that you want to remember is to try to use the largest brush that you can for any particular area, because when you use a smaller brush, you're going to end up with more brush strokes showing, which is fine if that's what you want to see. If you want to have a lot of brush strokes showing in your paint, that's one style, so that's fine too. But if you want it to look more solid, you might try to use the biggest brush you can in a certain area. And also with these paints that we use with the kits and in my classes, it's mostly a kind of a beginner's acrylic, which means it might not quite have the same amount of pigment that a more expensive paint might have. So if you really start to enjoy your painting and want to stick with it and really create some things that you're going to have for a long time and hang on your wall, you might switch to a higher quality paint with more pigment. With these paints that we use for our student classes, you might have to do 2 coats of paint to get a real solid color or a real deep color. And you'll find that on this painting I chose to do 2 coats on some areas, just because I wanted this one to be really bright and brilliant. You can see here I'm still filling in the background and trying to add the darker shade around the edges. And I'm just going to continue to do that, so I might not make too many comments at this point as I'm just filling in the background. And by the way, should you want to choose a different color background, that's perfectly fine too. This is your painting, and I would love for you to do it the way that you want to do it. And if you choose to do something, dramatically different with your pre-sketched canvas or your printed canvas, I'd love it if you'd send a picture of your finished painting to Sociable Art so that I can share it with other people so they can see that you can really do some creative things. Just because it's printed or pre-sketched doesn't mean that you can't kind of show your own style. So feel free to change it up. I'm just showing you the way that I painted it, but please do it your way. You can see in this area that I have definitely added a little more of the dark blue around the rainbow, just like I did around the edges of the canvas. I just wanted it to kind of help to make that rainbow just really pop out. Now I'm going to start filling in the rainbow, and I'm starting with my pink shade. It's pretty deep pink. You can lighten it up if you'd like it to be a brighter, lighter pink, and you can do that by adding white to it. And as when I'm doing a rainbow, I always think back to school and how they taught us what order the colors go in. And my teacher told us to remember it by saying Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow. B is blue, indigo, violet. So Roy G. Biv. I think I asked some kids, and nowadays they teach them in a different way. I don't think they say Roy G. Biv anymore. But that's how I always remember. If you'll notice, every time that I switch to a new color on the rainbow, I start with the part of that area to the left, and then I go to the area where the two colors are touching, and I kind of combine those two colors that touch. So Roy G. Biv, and the rainbow is filled in. So now I'm going to fill in the unicorn's face and neck, and I created a shade of, it's mostly white, and then I added a little bit of purple and a little bit of pink. You can make the unicorn's face as deep a color as you want, or at whatever color you want. White would be a nice color too for the unicorn. If I were to do the skin, maybe I would try white. But this time I just did this white with a little bit of purple and a little bit of pink. So I'm filling in, and I'm going around the eye, and I'm trying to make sure to leave the room for the white of the eye too. And you have to pay attention to your brush strokes. Pay attention to the direction they're going. So don't go in every different direction. Try to go in one direction with your brush strokes, so that it doesn't leave a lot of mishmash of different directions that you can see in the paint. So try and go in the same direction, and still you'll probably be able to see maybe more brush strokes than you want, and just know that you can go back and put a second coat on, and then you will not see those. It'll be a deeper, more solid color. So I'm just continuing to fill in a fast motion. And one thing I'm doing is I just did that darker purple shade around where the jawline is, and right at the top of the head, and you can just blend that in. If both colors are wet, you can blend them together. So just know I just created a little shading by just adding a little bit of a darker purple into that area. So now I'm filling in the eye. Your unicorn's eye can be whatever color you think it should be. I decided my unicorn was going to have a blue iris. That's the colored part of the eye. So I'm filling that in with my cobalt blue, and I'm doing a pretty deep color. On second thought, I probably could have done a lighter shade of that blue, but here I'm doing it this deeper shade of blue. And then in my palette, I didn't have any black, so I used straight purple for the black part of the eye, for the pupil. But if you have black, you might want to use that instead. So I'm just going to fill that in. And also there's a white to the eye. Don't forget to add that. You might want to wait to add it though, because if you add it now, you're probably going to smear the blue paint into it. And there I am just adding a little nostril on the horse, and I just used the purple paint for that. Okay, now I'm filling in the unicorn's horn, and I decided to make mine a very light yellow. So it's mostly white, and then I added a little bit of yellow to it, and I'm filling that in, and I'll do some lines on it later. But for right now, I'm just going to fill it in. One thing I want to mention is when I filled in the horse's face, I'm sorry, not horse, it's a unicorn, it's a magical unicorn. When I filled in the face, I could also have filled in the ear, and I kind of forgot to do that. So you see there's the ear sticking up there, and you can do that in the same color as you did the face. I'll end up doing mine a little bit later. So now I'm going to start filling in the hair for the horse. And what I do is I don't do just a solid color. I kind of add some streaks of color into each section of hair in the mane. Right now I'm doing the deep pink right here. But what you'll find that I'm going to do is I'm going to do some of these brush strokes in the deep pink. But then I'm going to switch my brush without cleaning it. I'm going to switch to some white and add some streaks of white in. And then without cleaning the brush, I'm going to switch to purple and and add some purple into this forelock of hair on the horse. Gosh, I keep saying horse. Obviously, it's a unicorn. So here I am just adding streaks of white, and then I'm going to switch to purple. And there we go. And I'm going to add that in there. And then we'll move on to the next section of hair. You can do these any color you want. I kind of just changed colors. I didn't use every color that's in the rainbow. I thought that might be too confusing looking, but you'll see that I added pinks, purple, the orange. Mostly tried to stay in. There's a little bit of blue in there too for the other portions of hair. And so you'll see. It's kind of self-explanatory. I'm going to do each section of hair the same way, but with different colors and just some streaks throughout. Okay, now that the mane is done, I've gone back to fill in that ear. So if you have not already, you can go back and fill in the ear. And I'm doing it the same color as the horse, which was white, and then a little bit of pink and a little bit of purple. So it's mostly that one shade, but if you want to add like a little bit of a darker purple on the inside of the ear, you can do that too. So here's that dark purple I'm adding to the inner ear. You can blend that in because the paint's still wet. So adding that a little bit of that to the nostril as well. And then a little bit in the pupil of the eye and into this forelock. And then switching colors, I grabbed a little bit of some white paint on my brush, and I just wanted to add a little bit of highlight on these little sections on the horn, the unicorn's horn. You can't really see very well what I'm doing here, but I just add a little white in each little section of the horn. So I'm just adding that white into the white part of the eye, making sure that's nice and white. And then I added, using the wooden end of my brush, I dipped that in the white paint and I added a little reflection on the eye, which just makes eyes look a little bit more alive. It's a nice little trick, just adding that little white dot on there. Okay, so what I did between the last shot and this shot is that I added a second coat of paint to a lot of the areas. So you'll see this looks a lot more vibrant. That's because I added a second coat into the background. I added a second coat on the unicorn's face and neck and into some of the hair. So you can do that if you want to take the time. Otherwise, it looks fine without it. And now I'm just going back and adding some detail. So I added an outline around the top of the eye, adding eyelashes, and I'm using the purple paint because I don't have black in my palette. So I also outlined around the iris of the eye, and then I just did a little outline on the nostril there. And I'm going to switch to orange paint to do outline of the horn. But here I'm still using the purple, and I just did a little bit of outlining on the ear. You can outline the entire unicorn, but I just chose to outline parts of it. So I just outlined around that ear on the lower side. And for the horn, I'm going to outline that in orange. And the only other outlining I'm going to do is I'm going to outline just a little bit of the mane with the purple paint as well, just to have that stand out, to have the contrast be a little bit more. But that's, it's just a choice. You don't have to do it. I also want to mention to you, so I don't forget, while I didn't sketch stars on the background, you can add a few white stars around the horn to make it look magical, and also some white dots to look like little stars or like magic. So I added that, and you'll see that in the finished picture, but I didn't do it here in the video. So just know that you can add that if you would like to. So I'm going to continue doing a little bit of outlining, and I'll just be silent while you do that. And also, you can see here that I'm adding just some little, kind of some wavy little curly brush strokes in the background, just to make it look more interesting. So I've dipped my brush into both the blue paint, I'll do a little bit of streaking of the blue paint, but then I also switch to the white paint without cleaning the brush just to have some different shades. And they're kind of broken lines, and I'm just, adding some of these curved lines into the background just to make it look more magical and more interesting. So I'm using different shades of white and blue, the same colors that I used to create the background, but I'm just using a slightly darker shade and a slightly lighter shade. And I'm going to do that all throughout the background. All these little lines and curls. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to do some of the same sort of idea, some lines in the mane of the horse. Oh my goodness, how many times am I going to say horse? It's a unicorn. Anyway, I'm going to do some lines in the mane that will just accent that too. Okay, so I'm adding some lines into the mane to make it look, more like hair. I have some white that I have mixed with a little bit of the turquoise color, and I'm just adding some streaks into that area. And I'm going to do the same thing in the other colors with some different shades. Um, I just want to have those little lines in there that make it look more like hair, and it just makes it look a little more interesting too. So in most of these areas, I'm going to use white mixed with the color that you see there. And also, there's yellow up in the rainbow, and I didn't have any yellow anyplace else in the lower part of the painting. So eventually I'm going to add some yellow into the orange areas so that that's represented as well down low in the canvas. And I'm just going to continue adding these streaks of color. Well, so that's about it for the unicorn. You can keep adding as much as you want, just keep working on it. And also if you have some glitter paint or rhinestones, that's fun to add as well. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to like and subscribe, because then I can bring you more and more of these types of videos to go along with your paint at home kits, which you can get at sociableart.com. So you'll see the like button with a thumbs up. If you can do that, I'd appreciate it. Thanks for painting with me, and if you subscribe, you'll see more of these. Thanks.